Hey, what's up, everyone? Welcome back to House of Footy. It's your boy Ray, and tonight I've got Mac with me. Welcome, Mac.
What's good?
Gio is away today as he, like the rest of Man U, is still chasing Mickey Van de Ven after he ran through the whole team. But don't worry, on today's podcast, Mac and I will be reviewing match week 6 of the Premier League, which took place this past weekend. Before we get into it, don't forget to follow us on our social media, both on X and Instagram. Our handle is at @house_of_footy. Also, don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe to us. We are on both Spotify and YouTube. And lastly, feel free to get in touch with us via email. We love hearing from you guys, and we want you guys getting involved. Our email is houseoffooty@hotmail.com. All right, so as I just mentioned, there was a lot that took place in that Man U Spurs game, so we're going to go straight to that one. Not a result that Gio, our other co-host, would have wanted, and I'm not sure something that we as a group would have predicted, but Tottenham were worthy 3-0 winners in this game. I think it's fair to say, Mac. Over the last couple of weeks, I'm going to be perfectly honest, haven't been following the Premier League so often, but this did take me as a surprise. What were your overall thoughts on this, Mac?
I think so. Going into this game, and I think I want to split this up into two parts because the highlight, the first takeaway, is arguably it's the biggest club in English football, arguably a top 2 world in terms of size, a fan base, of what garners the most attraction is Manchester United. And on the negative side of it, that's going to glean more eyeballs. But going into it, I think both these teams were desperate for a result, because both the managers kind of felt like they were under some tension. Going into this game, if either team lost, they would have fallen off of and stayed in the bottom half of the table after 6 games, which to either of these managers being in their first couple seasons respectively in for their job would have been a poor start, and you definitely would have been kind of under the cosh going forward, which right now Ten Hag is in. So I think, again, going in, both of them desperately needed a result, and more importantly, in a lot of cases, to not lose, because otherwise you're going to kind of get a lot of heat on your back, which now, to what happened in the game in Manchester United, Ten Hag, the club as a whole, Manchester United, everything is coming into question now. Where listening to a lot of commentators, going through a bunch of different podcasts, kind of getting kind of the gleam of what the fan and I guess pundit idea of where Manchester United are currently. It's not great, because everyone's talking about how has Ten Hag been set up to fail as a lame duck manager? Should we blame the players? Should we blame the game plan? Should we give credit to Spurs in some case? But a lot of people seem to avoid that question. It seems like, again, everything has come back into focus, and time is going back to a couple years ago with when Ole Gunnar Solskjaer first started off poorly with Manchester United a couple years back, and unfortunately he was given the hook. To give you a frame of reference, Ray, where in terms of where Manchester United are currently, their 7 points are the joint fewest after 6 games of a Premier League season for Manchester United ever. Same record for both the 2013-14 season and 2021 season. And they've only scored 5 goals, and that's the second fewest after this many games in Premier League history for Manchester United. So they've been poor defensively, poor record-wise, poor scoring goals. Everything about them seems to be, for a lack of a better word, in shambles right now. So, and this game really much epitomized it, starting from the very first moment of the game, it felt like, where Tottenham were on them. And then, as you kind of alluded to at the beginning of the podcast, for the second time in 2 games in a row, a defender runs through the entire team, causing a goal against Manchester United. So very, very poor start to the game, very poor position where they are in the table, and of course where the fan base is after this result.
Yeah, I would not want to be one of those Man U players at the moment, with all of the media focusing on them, and rightly so. Like you said, Man U are probably, if not 2, probably the most famous and most successful club in the Premier League. But the way they've started, and we've seen sort of their run of form recently. The game that you referenced with the poor defending was against Twente in the Europa League, a game where you would have expected Man U maybe off the back of a poor performance, I would say, against Crystal Palace, only getting a tie. You think, okay, maybe now we have a couple players coming back. I think Højlund made his way back for Man United. Maybe he can get something going in this Europa League game. Man U did, I think, take the lead in that game, but of course we'll peg back, and so you're thinking, oh, that's not the greatest result. Spurs away at the Spurs at home on the weekend might be the better way to go about it, and the fact that you start that way, like you said, Mac. 3 minutes in, Brennan Johnson finds the opening goal after that Mickey Van de Ven run. A lot happens, and we can cover, of course, the big moments towards the end of the first half, Mac, in a bit. But nonetheless, the second half, the way it starts again as well. If you're Ten Hag, the whole time you're talking about what the game plan is from there. Very much, I would say, like Mac. I'm not sure if you guys covered the Arsenal Man City game where I think it was a red card as well that was given towards the end of the first half for Arsenal, and so of course Arsenal would have to play a more defensive style and be on basically on alert starting from the second half, and of course to concede a goal within 2 minutes of the second half. That plan goes to the trash, and just poor performance from then on, and like we were talking about this yesterday just off the podcast, and just personally, this is not a great look because even the fans don't really look like, the players don't really look like they want to play for the manager. So at this point, it screams to me, if Ten Hag doesn't get a performance from this team and a good result in the next couple games, which we'll talk about in a little bit later, maybe, Mac, it's going to be wraps for him before the end of before, I guess, going into November. I guess anything else from that performance stood out to you, or do you want to talk about the red card that kind of changed the game?
I want to talk. So before we move on to Tottenham, because I do want to speak about them a little bit, and about the red card, I want to talk about kind of a word that you highlighted there that I want to kind of flesh out a little bit more, was game plan, and that lack thereof. When you see their initial setup of how even kind of Mickey Van de Ven broke through. And he talked about it after the game, saying I felt like if there is enough gaps in the space in the field, I can run straight through them. There is no problems there. So it's been targeted by other teams where they seem like the way that they set up, where a lot of teams nowadays they either set up in a high block where you're trying to press the opposition, or as you kind of highlighted earlier, where you want to be able to move defensive, let's say Arsenal in certain games, where in a low block and try to kind of condense space in your own third versus the offensive third, as other teams like Liverpool historically have done, where Manchester United seemed to be in a mid block, but then there wasn't really any intensity of anywhere. Okay, we want to be able to make sure they don't get past this point. At that point, we're going to apply that pressure, where if you look at the lines of how they're set up, there is so much space in between those areas of the pitch, where a player like Bentancur is able to play traditionally as a six by himself, and normally when he's played in a double pivot, he's been more the offensive focused one. So and you had two kind of traditional number 10s in Madison and Kulusevski in some ways, who's even a winger, play as more as 8s, and they're able to kind of isolate in between that mid block kind of setup by Manchester United. And for me, in this game against Spurs, you think, they're going to give us opportunities if we kind of just play well enough defensively. Setting up in a mid block in the way that they did, in the manner that they did, speak to either one of two things: either poor coaching, or players not believing in their coach enough to actually follow what needed to be done, because that is not the right solution against a team like this. You've seen how other teams have gone at Spurs before, and because they can give you a chance because of how high risk of a football the style they try to play. So for me, I really think the lack of game plan from the first minute, and then you even see, as you kind of highlighted, right after the break, halftime, same thing again, where they didn't come in with an organized plan and immediately kind of got pegged back even further. And even though they did end up growing into the game a little bit more towards the middle of the second half, the game was already too far gone by that point. So for me, very poor game plan, and I definitely agree with what you're saying in terms of Ten Hag. I would be surprised as of right now if he makes it to 2025 as Manchester United manager. But to jump on to your next question in regards to the red card, quick answer there. I don't know if you feel any differently about me. When I first saw it, from the angle we saw watching on TV, I'm like, that's a red, because it looked like, and maybe this is my viewpoint of Bruno, kind of baking into it a little bit. It looked a little petulant. It looked like he was angry and kind of lashing out a little bit at Madison from the initial look, where he's like, I'm pissed off, I'm trying to hit somebody, that type of thing. And he is the type of player historically that has done that before. Fair or not fair. But looking on the replay, you can tell he tripped. So I think at worst case, that's a yellow. Definitely a foul. And again, for me, definitely yellow, but in no way a world of red. I wish they would have reviewed that moment personally. What about you?
Yeah, I agree there. It definitely looks like it was a moment where he was trying to just get something on Madison, so he's not able to progress further. But we watched multiple replays, and even though it's just a split moment where you kind of see his foot go from studs towards the player to sort of kind of going away from actually making contact with the leg. I think a yellow would have been the right choice as well, because it did change the game. And even though Man U set up poorly and really couldn't create anything else in the first half, really, until, like you mentioned, in the second half they had a brief period of a spell where they were basically just lumping the balls in and creating some havoc, which would have been, I think, to when you're a player down, you just have to create some chaos and hopefully something happens from there. Of course, it didn't turn out to be, and even Dominic Solanke gets on the end of a chaotic, I think, set play in the Man U end, which really wraps it up. But I guess we can talk about then, Mac, before we move on to the next games, what this has in store for Man U, because of course Man U do have Porto in midweek. They do also have Aston Villa coming up next weekend. Then they have Brentford, and we could end up having a game between Jose Mourinho's Fenerbahce against this current Erik ten Hag's Man United that might see the end of Ten Hag if these results don't go that way. And with Bruno out for at least another game or two games, it might not be the best going forward for them. So I guess we'll see what happens there. But Mac, let's get rid of talking about these mid-table teams. Let's talk about the top of the table. And so, of course, three games that we can talk about. I'll let you cook first. Arsenal won 4-2 at home against Leicester. Newcastle held Man City 1-1 at Newcastle held Man City 1-1 at home, and Liverpool beat Wolves 2-1 away. So I guess I'll let you cook on that, Mac. Was there any specific fixture or result that really stood out to you?
For me, the key one here is where, and this has been a little bit of break since you recently got married. Congratulations. But you missed kind of a good section of our podcast when we're talking about the title race and how things have shaken up in regards to kind of after Rodri injury. And this is the first podcast I think that we'll have that's come out where he's had a full ACL tear. So he's gone for the rest of the season, no question about that, and what impact that could potentially have. So for me, this really opens up the title race as a whole for a lot of these different clubs. And for me, going into the season, definitely Manchester City were the favorites. I was picking Arsenal. Maybe that's my bias, my dream, whatever. Optimism shines through. Who knows? But I feel like this definitely opens it up for a team like Liverpool. Or is there another team that opens up and potentially could be joining in on the title race after that recent injury and how things could potentially shake out for the rest of the season? But from these three individual games, I think the clear one to be able to pick out, of course, for me, is the Newcastle one, Man City one. It was not a great performance by Manchester City levels. When you look at kind of their goal scoring opportunities, it wasn't as if they created an abundance and miss some. That's when I generally have felt like over the last couple of years, if City dropped points, it was more not to where they didn't play well, that their process wasn't correct. It's just because they scuffed their chances or they weren't clinical enough in the final third. And based off odds, that's bound to happen to every team. You're going to lose games. The question really is about the process. And I think obviously it's been one game, but since the Rodri injury, but there is worrying signs here where how you kind of can close that gap, fill up that gap. Again, you're playing against a Newcastle midfield. I think they had started with Joe Linton, Bruno Guimaraes, and Sandro Tonali as a three. That's one of the more beefy, physical, aggressive midfields you're going to face in the Premier League. But Man City as a whole, that's going to be tough to them to do without Rodri, because your like-for-like replacements are Gundogan, Rico Lewis, Kovacic, who's been unconvincing since coming over from Chelsea. So there isn't I don't think you're going to recall Calvin Phillips now, but there's not a clear good answer. And I think it's going to take time, and they have to figure out a new way to play, because Rodri, I think, is their most irreplaceable player, and they unfortunately have lost him. So what they do going forward, this Newcastle game really showed out because they felt like they couldn't get in the groove or creating enough opportunities in the final third because they had more players back defensively to help compensate for that loss of Rodri. So again, it's for me, the individual result, I'm not too surprised. Newcastle are a strong team. And I think that you brought up when we spoke off the podcast yesterday is where, and I think Pep Guardiola in a backhanded compliment type of way is like, this is one of the more dangerous teams because they only have to play once a week, right? So I'm not surprised that a result like this could happen, but it definitely puts a worrying sense of what Man City will be like for the rest of the season in the Premier League. What about you? Is there a game or result that stands out to you that you want to talk about?
Well, of course, I haven't caught up on all of the action that took place, but I did keep an eye out on the Liverpool result. Not too recently, they did lose against it was Nottingham Forest, but beat Bournemouth 3-0. So a good way to bounce back there. And then, of course, a tricky game against Wolves, where Wolves are not the best team in the Premier League. No disrespect to them, but on their day, they could cause some problems. It was more so Liverpool that were the ones kind of causing themselves problems with Konate. I'm not sure if you watched the goal that Liverpool conceded, Mac. It looked like his controller disconnected when he was playing FIFA. The attacker was able to nip in and, of course, create a chance so that Wolves were able to score. So at this moment, Liverpool, it's to me, definitely there and amongst the title race, should be considered part of the top three if we kind of have that separation between themselves, Arsenal, and Man City. But given that type of goal they conceded and the fact that the Nottingham Forest game at home, that loss was I think a big wake-up call that this is still technically a work in progress, new manager, same players, but it's still something that Liverpool have to, as a team and club, figure out that we have to take things game by game and not just focus on the next game and what else. Who's going to score? Because of course we've had Luis Diaz start quite well, Musa also start quite well. Will Diogo Jota be the one that sort of deputizes from here on out? Will Darwin Nunez come back into the fold? Is Dominic Szoboszlai, who should have scored in this game, is he going to come in and actually get on score sheet some more and make that sort of his position moving forward? Still some questions to be answered there. So I think as a whole, Liverpool should still see themselves as part of the top three and challenging for the title. Like you said, the Man City news were quite groundbreaking for the league across the board. So we'll have to wait and see about that. But before we wrap it up, Mac, do we want to have a word on Arsenal or perhaps a new challenger? How they show up in Pokemon? Is that how it is? They have a new challenger.
Yes, new challengers are yes. You've absolutely. So for me, I'll be honest with you, and this question was there on the doc just to kind of raise suspicion. No, there's only the three really for me. There is no question about that. I think Liverpool. In my going into the season, this is how I viewed it. This may have been a little bit unfair. If you would ask me kind of if I were to give percentages of who would win, City 65%, Arsenal 35%. Now I think it's more so where, given the Rodri injury, Arsenal are probably the favorites. Slightly behind will be Manchester City still for me. And now I think Liverpool are kind of like sitting in the porch and knocking on the door, be like, hey, what about us? We're right here chilling. Again, they've only conceded 2 goals thus far in the Premier League season. I do think they've been fortunate in regards to the schedule that they've had. I think the toughest team they faced thus far this season, I know this is a funny time to say this, but I think it was Manchester United, actually, who they absolutely creamed 3-0. So, again, what have they really done thus far this year? I think for them, though, is they have also the backing of the confidence where, yes, Arne Slot's new, but the whole team's been there, done that. I think the only player on the starting 11 that hasn't, I guess, been a focal point. There's only been like really 3 players that haven't been a focal point on a title women team. That would be Diaz, Gravenberch, and Szoboszlai. Everybody else has been there, done that pretty much for Liverpool before. If I remember correctly, maybe I'm wrong. You can feel free to correct me. But a lot of the core members of the team have been very successful. So they know they have the inner belief that they can get it done. I think the interesting part for them, and the player I'm looking at the most, someone that you highlighted earlier actually, is Shabazz himself. I think he can be kind of the X factor in their season in terms of how far they may end up going, where if he has, let's say, bangs in 12, 13 goals in the Premier League and does really well in the assist category as well, I think that's adding a different dimension that we haven't seen before, where it really just was kind of Salah and co in the attacking front three dealing all the damage, where if they're adding a midfielder and player like that into the goals as well, I think that's going to create a different dimension, because what Gravenberch has done, I think, has been phenomenal. Will that continue? Hopefully. But I think they need a little bit more from their midfield on the offensive sense if they're going to be in that race in the thick of it towards the end of the season. But to also jump on the other team that I think is going to get a lot of credit, Chelsea or Cole Palmer FC. I think
that's right.
I know this is maybe unfair, and I sincerely apologize. Cole Palmer scored one fewer goal in 20 minutes than Manchester United has done thus far this season. It's really about him. In that free kick just is absolutely phenomenal. A couple of the other goals, yeah, you rinse, whatever. It happens. That's fine. That's cool. You take them, be happy. But that free kick is just pure quality. And they are going to be a fascinating team this season. I think they're going to have extreme highs. I also think they're going to have extreme lows. And they haven't hit those yet, but I think they will come, because defensively, they're horrible. Sanchez, I don't know what he was doing in the last game. I don't know if you see the couple goals that Chelsea did concede, but this team should have won 4-0 if they just weren't stupid, like if they just did the simple things well and didn't kind of shoot themselves in their own foot type of ways. It very comes up to, but no, the point being, Chelsea for me, I think they may view themselves in the title race. They are not. They still are, for me, as of thus far we've seen the season, in terms of the batch of the rest of who's going to finish fourth, they're probably the favorite there, but not in the title race. I'm sorry, not for me. What about you?
Yeah, no, I just a word on Chelsea. I do agree. They should see themselves as a favorite for the top four, but not necessarily in the title race this far in the season. Though Cole Palmer, we do have to credit him. Just imagining the freedom that he's playing with now, after the first season, we myself specifically, a big doubter from the first season, thinking how will he sort of transition this season, kind of picked up a new sort of role within the team, and like I said, that freedom to express himself at home for these Chelsea fans, and this, the look of delight in his face when he scored that free kick, and he knows that he's of course now a instant Chelsea fan favorite. Great for him. I'm excited to see how he can continue this up with the upcoming game. So, yep, that's pretty much it. We can definitely talk about Arsenal, but I think we can leave that for our next time. Let's take a quick break here, Mac, and then we'll talk about some Champions League games that are coming up this week. So stay with us, guys. Welcome back to Hustle Footy, guys. We are going to continue our podcast now, discussing the Champions League games that are taking place this coming week. Now, I did want to have a quick word on how the Champions League sort of format has changed, and I am honestly, so far, a big fan of it, in the sense that there's a lot of games. Likely, there's going to be some crazy results, like how we saw Bayern scored 9 goals in that match against some, no disrespect to some of the teams that may not make it to the next round. Maybe it's set up more so in sort of like a Super League format, where you really expect only the elite teams in Europe making it past to the next round. But still, there's going to be definitely some crazy results that we see, and very much the fashion where before you'd have to watch two teams face each other home and away. Every match kind of counts, because you don't really have that makeup game in a couple weeks' time or a month's time against the team that you maybe lost against. And one of the references that I'll point out is, of course, Barcelona, who started poorly. They lost the first game, and they won't really have a chance to face, I can't recall, I think it was Monaco who they lost to in the first game. And it makes it exciting. I'm still kind of seeing what will happen with this sort of format and what will happen for the quote unquote big teams. But I'm enjoying it so far. Excited for this second round of fixtures, which, Mac, I'll toss it to you first. Are there any specific, I guess, games or fixtures that are coming up this week that you're looking forward to?
It absolutely, for me, I think there's a clear number one pick here. And it's definitely Man City versus Slaven Bratislava. Is that how you pronounce it? I'm joking. I could not care less about that game. I don't know what a Bratislava is, I'll be honest with you, but it sounds fun to say, so I was going to be excited for that game. This may surprise you, but I'm actually very interested to see. This might be a little bit of a trendy pick. I apologize, but very curious to see how Leverkusen face off against AC Milan. That's one of the interesting part of this format, where there'll always at least be one or two bigger games, no matter what, across the fixture. And I think that's the benefit where, okay, yeah, maybe we don't care about the Slaven Bratislava or Young Boys or Srana Zavedaveda, but we can get a Milan versus Leverkusen. That seems like a great matchup. Again, Leverkusen have already lost thus far this season, so they're not going to go back-to-back undefeated, even though they didn't finish the last season undefeated. So, not that invincible, I guess. But with that being said, I'm very excited with this matchup, just because when you're looking at the individual kind of matchups that could take place across the pitch, you're seeing a lot of potential there, where a player like Rafael Leao, I don't know if you've seen kind of some of his recent play thus far this season, but he's definitely started off on a tear for AC Milan in terms of kind of building up from back and breaking teams down, and going off on a back, really a wing back like Jeremy Frimpong, where you're going to see kind of the split there. So matchups like that in this game, in this type of competition, always intrigued me, because I've never seen these two teams play before. At least I can't recall. So that for me gets me really excited to see how kind of this, even in their mannerism, the style of the play, oil versus water in some ways, where Leverkusen want to kind of defeat you with consistent pressure, possession, kind of building out, where Milan, it feels like a little bit more they're trying to create for the individual moments. Again, very excited to see what happens. Both these teams, I think, in their respective Champions League, I don't recall if they won both of their games. Correct me if I'm wrong there. But again, this is the matchup I have my eyes on most going into it. So I'm very excited to see what happens here.
Yeah, I will correct you. Unfortunately, Milan did lose to Liverpool in the last round, so that one stood out to me. But Leverkusen did win their first fixture 4-0, which was quite impressive. Of course, they're going to sort of want to continue from their success last season, and that is a great shot, Mac. That's a great match to look out for. One that I'm very interested in is a sort of new addition to the Champions League from the Premier League. Of course, I think previous winners of a European title, Aston Villa, finally back in the Champions League this time around, and they're facing off against Bayern Munich, who I guess you just mentioned Leverkusen. I believe Bayern Munich tied Leverkusen this week in 1-1, and Aston Villa tied the team that they faced this weekend, Ipswich, 2-2, and so both teams are likely going to be looking to get all 3 points here for sure. Aston Villa will be at home for this game, so that's going to be interesting to see if this will kind of force them to come out and be the aggressor in a match against Bayern Munich, who traditionally have been quite strong in this competition. And we know Vincent Kompany, a manager who has managed against Aston Villa previously, just as recently as last year, should have something at least to base his game plan off of. But I really want to keep an eye out on a couple of performances from whether it's Ollie Watkins, who I think started in the weekend against Ipswich. Yes, right, he did start. And John Duran. Will that be something that sort of I guess headache of a tactical change for Emery, or will he sort of go back to Ollie Watkins? He's been performing. He performed well last season and got Aston Villa to where they are now. Will that happen? And another player, Morgan Rogers from Aston Villa, has had a great start to the season, and just want to see. He got, I believe he did get on the score sheet last time out as well this past weekend. So I'm excited to see if he's going to start this game and how he'll affect it. And on the flip side, Bayern, they do have to put on a big showing here off the back of a tie in the league against last year's champions. Not the worst, but they did win 9-2 last time out in the Champions League, so they're gonna want to continue that run of form. A big match where both teams will look to get all 3 points. It's gonna hopefully give us with a lot of goals. So that's very much what I'm excited for. I did want to ask Mac because I quickly just talked to you about Arsenal in between in the break. They face off against PSG, and I'm not really. Well, you may give me some of your thoughts on the potential matchup, but I'm interested because since we last recorded, of course, Odegaard has picked up the injury and is likely going to be out for some time. And it looks like Havertz has dropped into midfield and Trossard is the starter. Is that sort of, am I getting that right, Mac? And if you were to choose, is that sort of how you would move forward with the sort of starting 11 for Arsenal in the coming, I guess, in the foreseeable future? What are your thoughts there?
So, yeah, yes, you are correct. And yes, that's how I would play it. I'm absolutely on board with that adjustment. Kai Havertz, initially, he was signed for Arsenal as a left-sided number 8. And that was the role that he was supposed to be able to fulfill. Of course, going over the course of last season, he ended up fitting better as the central striker, the way he was able to apply a different type of element into the game, getting it behind and causing a little bit more havoc and creating, I would say, more depth to the pitch versus, let's say, a Gabriel Jesus, who he's a little bit more singular in terms of what he's trying to do on the pitch, in my opinion, and has definitely put a lot more quality in front of net, which I know is Kai Havertz not necessarily the greatest at that, but he's definitely better than Jesus in a lot of ways. So yes, that's how they played it, and I agree that that's the structure that they'll do going forward. The interesting part for me is where against a team like Leicester, who, to be fair, they won 4-2. I think that scoreline flatters them a little bit in the aspect of it was 2 goals after the 90th minute that kind of pushed them over the edge. However, over the course of the game, they absolutely dominated Leicester. It was only the 15 minutes of them Leicester scoring their first goal, their second. Aside from that, it was an Arsenal onslaught, and it's really just the Leicester goalkeeper that kept them in. And I think if you'd ask me who had the best individual performance from the weekend in the Premier League, it might be him. He was standing on his head making some unbelievable saves. So for me, I think that's going to be very interesting to see about Arsenal because they've gotten a lot of criticism thus far this season where reverting, and the comparisons have been made to Arteta and Jose Mourinho as defensive tactics. And I was listening to one podcaster talking about how the manager that's most influenced this type of Arsenal team wasn't Arsene Wenger, it was actually Arteta's, or Pep Guardiola. It's Arteta's first manager in England, David Moyes, and how defensive structure they try to set up. So again, I think now going into the next couple of games until the international break, Arsenal, I would feel, have a little bit of a lighter schedule. They faced Leicester City at home. They're facing PSG at home, and now they're facing recently promoted Southampton. This should be a couple of games where they should feel more comfortable to flex their muscle and be on more of a front foot where you're seeing that there isn't just that defensive aspect of the team, which is phenomenal, but now we have more offensive options as well, and it can still score without Odegaard being kind of the reliant on everything. Interesting player who we should definitely kind of keep eyes on a lot for me is Bukayo Saka, because a lot of the times when you're looking at to see how Arsenal in previous seasons got into the final third, and they created very much a triangle of Odegaard, Saka, Ben White, and it was just them rotating each other's positions, trying to create different areas where they can get one-on-one, and particularly Bukayo Saka one-on-one with his opposition to create for himself or his teammates. Since the Odegaard injury, and Ben White actually missing a couple of games due to injury as well, it's been of that trio is just Saka, and he hasn't been in the forefront on their offensive, I'll say, areas of the pitch. I think he has 6 assists, 1 in each and every single game thus far this season, which is great to him, but his influence of the game felt like it's waned a little bit as I'm watching it. So it'll be interesting to see if he can be still that much of a focal point given the loss of, I guess, his running mates beside him. So very interested to see what they'll do against PSG, but as of right now, I think considering everything, all things are going well for Arsenal.
Yeah, the only thing I'm really looking forward to in this game is Arsenal have, of course, made huge steps in the Premier League. However, and of course, last year, I think unlucky to go out against Bayern in the quarters, semis, if I'm not mistaken.
Of course, yeah.
This is kind of going to be not their priority, but a really a statement for them to make. Can they be a regular Champions League team that is sort of one of the stronger teams where if they come up against a, let's say, we just talked about maybe Bayern Leverkusen, who've done quite well in their domestic league, even AC Milan, who've done quite well in the domestic league. PSG, of course, leading the table in their domestic league. Can they put away these types of opposition in a comfortable fashion? PSG are going to be a interesting test because, of course, they are missing their big star in Mbappe, but they do have someone in the likes of Bradley Barcola who started the season quite well. I think 6 goals already in Ligue 1. So that's going to be interesting to see because PSG have a very young squad who might not have that that experience, but have that raw talent that they might just come out and play and try to outplay Arsenal. But I think it's very important for Arsenal to not just win, but win in a fashion that they can say, hey, we are the big boys here. We are now trying to establish ourselves as a Champions League team that is going to dominate this competition. We're going to put you guys aside, even though you guys are doing quite well in Ligue 1, for example. So that's what I'm looking forward to from this matchup. And pretty much for the rest of the other games, interested to see what other results come out. But apart from that, we'll definitely cover those in our next podcast. So, Mac, this concludes our podcast for today. If you guys like what you heard, please like and subscribe to us on our social medias. That's at @houseof_footy. If you have any comments, suggestions, or general banter, get in touch with us via email as well, houseoffooty@hotmail.com. The next time you hear from us will be this Friday when we review this week's Champions League action, and we'll also preview a little bit of the upcoming Premier League matches taking place this next weekend. So until then, thank you for joining us, Mac.
Peace out.
See you guys soon.